Dr. Madison Blackwood's combat boots echoed through the ancient halls of the Galactic Council's Academy of War Studies, each step a deliberate percussion against marble floors designed for beings twice her size. The doctoral robes felt strange over her tactical bodysuit, but tradition was tradition, even if she was about to challenge every other tradition in this 1,000-year-old institution. You understand, Dr. Blackwood, Supreme War Scholar, Kthex's crystalline voice reverberated through the chamber, that your thesis fundamentally insults every major military doctrine in known space. The towering Vraxian's exoskeleton caught the light from the 7 suns visible through the chamber's transparent dome, casting rainbow refractions across the assembled council members. Maddie adjusted her presentation tablet, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. With all due respect, Supreme War Scholar, if you find the truth insulting, that's not a problem with the truth. A ripple of untranslatable sounds, the alien equivalent of shocked gasps and offended muttering, spread through the chamber. The gathered military elite of 17 spacefaring civilizations shifted in their environmental suits and acceleration couches, their attention locked on the seemingly insignificant human standing before them. The evolution of human military contracting. Why Earth's approach to warfare makes humanity the galaxy's most effective combat specialists. Kthex read from his own tablet, mandibles clicking in what Maddie had learned was barely contained irritation. You claim that human military contractors have achieved a 93% success rate in their engagements, while the galactic average sits at 67%. The data speaks for itself, Maddie replied, bringing up her first holographic display. Combat footage from a dozen worlds sparkled in the air, humans working alongside and against various species, adapting, innovating, succeeding where pure force had failed. We've turned pirates into security consultants, reformed insurgents into peacekeepers, and transformed centuries-old conflicts into lasting alliances. Through chaos, the outburst came from General Angstara, her photosynthetic tendrils darkening with emotion. Your species abandons proper military doctrine at the first sign of trouble. You improvise. You break protocols. We win, Maddie interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of every firefight she'd survived, every contract she'd completed, every life she'd saved by thinking outside the carefully constructed box of galactic military theory. We win because we understand something fundamental about warfare that the Council has forgotten in its 1,000 years of tradition. The goal isn't to fight better, it's to make fighting unnecessary. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Translation software struggling to keep up with the mochestvo of alien languages. Kfax raised all 4 of his primary limbs for silence, his exoskeleton now pulsing with bands of warning red. You wish to defend this heresy? He asked, using the formal academic challenge phrase that hadn't changed since the Academy's founding. Maddie's smile widened. That's why I'm here. Then perhaps, Kfax's voice dropped an octave, triggering primitive warning signals in Maddie's hindbrain. You would be willing to defend it properly, through trial by combat. Dead silence fell over the chamber. Even General Angstara's tendrils stopped their angry writhing. You can't be serious, someone whispered in the back. A human? In the trials. Maddie closed her tablet with a decisive click. 8 years of field work, 2 doctoral programs, and countless hours of research had led to this moment. The Council expected her to back down, to withdraw her thesis, to choose a champion as tradition demanded. They were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. Supreme War Scholar Kthex, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, I accept your challenge. But let's be clear about one thing. She swept her gaze across the assembled alien scholars and warriors. This isn't just a dissertation defense anymore. This is a practical demonstration of exactly why human military contractors are changing the face of warfare across known space. And class, her grin turned predatory, is definitely in session. You've lost your damn mind, Maddie. Lieutenant Commander James Torres, retired, watched his former squadmate move through another set of combat forms in the Academy's preparation chamber. The room, designed to accommodate warriors of all species, looked like someone had merged a military gym with an alien museum. "That's what they said when I took the hegemony contract," Maddie replied, transitioning smoothly from a traditional Marine Corps kata into a Juraxian war dance. Sweat darkened her compression shirt as she adapted the six-limbed movements for human anatomy. "Right before we turned their entire security doctrine upside down." "This is different," Torres insisted, tossing her a towel. "The trial by combat system isn't just about fighting. It's their whole philosophical approach to military education. No one's even attempted a personal defense in 300 years. Maddie caught the towel and grinned. "Exactly. They'd gotten complacent. Watch this." She pulled up a holographic display from her wrist computer. "I've been studying the trial's history. Look at the original texts." The ancient Vraxian script floated between them. Translation software rendering it in English. * knowledge earned through combat becomes wisdom carried in blood. *. It's not just about beating each other up, Maddie explained, pulling up combat footage from previous trials. The whole system was designed to prove military theories through practical application. Somewhere along the way, they forgot that part. Started focusing on the spectacle instead of the substance. Torres watched as she queued up another set of holograms, this time her own combat records from various contracts. "And you're going to, what, teach them the error of their ways by letting them beat you up?" "No." Maddie's eyes gleamed. "I'm going to teach them by showing them something they've never seen before. A warrior scholar who can bridge the gap between their traditions and humanity's innovations." She moved to the center of the chamber, where a series of holographic opponents flickered to life. Computer, run simulation Alpha 7. Multiple opponents. Vraxian combat doctrine. Standard trial protocols. The holograms attacked. Maddie moved like water, each defensive maneuver flowing into a counterattack. But instead of just fighting, she was narrating. "Notice how Vraxian military doctrine emphasizes linear engagement," she called out, ducking under a crystalline blade. "Their entire strategic philosophy is built on the assumption that combat should follow predictable patterns. But humanity," she rolled, came up inside a hologram's guard, and tapped its theoretical weak point. "We thrive on chaos." Torres watched, understanding slowly dawning. "You're turning the trial into a live demonstration of your thesis. Every move, every counter, every adaptation. It's all data," Maddie confirmed, terminating the simulation. "I'm not just fighting them. I'm proving my arguments in real time." She pulled up another display, this one showing her modified combat suit. "Look here. I've installed sensors and cameras throughout the armor. Everything gets recorded, analyzed, and annotated automatically. The Council's going to lose their minds." Torres chuckled, finally seeing the full scope of her plan. "That's the point." Maddie started another simulation, this one mimicking the Academy's arena. "They think trial by combat is about proving superiority. I'm going to show them it's about proving adaptability." She worked through the night, refining her movements, recording commentary, building a database of combat analyses that would make Sun Tzu proud. Each practice bout was a chapter in her dissertation, each adaptation a footnote in what was becoming less of a defense and more of a revolution. Just before dawn, as she prepared for her first official trial, Torres found her reviewing ancient Earth military texts alongside galactic combat manuals. "Still think this is worth risking your life over?" he asked. Maddie looked up, her eyes bright with purpose. "James, humanity didn't get to the stars by playing it safe. We got here by doing what everyone else said was impossible." She stood, checking her armor one final time. "Besides, if I'm right about this, we're not just changing how the galaxy fights, we're changing how it thinks about fighting. And that," she smiled, heading for the arena doors, That's worth any risk. The Academy's combat arena resembled a massive amphitheater designed by someone who'd taken gladiatorial combat far too literally. Crystalline structures jutted from the floor at impossible angles, creating a battlefield that seemed to defy basic physics. Maddie knew better. Everything in the arena served a purpose, even if that purpose wasn't immediately obvious to human eyes. War Scholar Vexthal, her first opponent, stood 3 meters tall, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting the morning light into deadly prismatic patterns. The Vraxian elite warrior had spent 2 centuries perfecting his species' combat doctrine. He was the living embodiment of everything her thesis challenged. The academic portion begins, announced Hithax from his elevated position. War Scholar Vexthal, present your counter-argument. Vexthal's mandibles clicked in what Maddie had learned was a gesture of supreme confidence. The human's thesis fails on 3 fundamental levels, his translator boomed. First, their documented success rate is an anomaly based on statistical. Point of order, Maddie interrupted, causing a ripple of murmurs through the gathered crowd. Under trial regulations, all arguments must be supported by practical demonstration. Article 7, Subsection 3 of the original doctrine. She smiled sweetly. Unless you prefer to skip straight to the practical portion. Vexthal's exoskeleton flushed amber, the Vraxian equivalent of a scowl. Very well. He moved into a perfect combat stance. I will demonstrate why human adaptability is inferior to proven doctrine. Weapons protocol established, Kthax declared. Begin. Vexthal attacked with textbook precision, his crystalline blade describing perfect arcs through the air. Every movement followed centuries of refined combat theory. To the assembled council members, it was martial poetry. Maddie's helmet cam activated, beginning its real-time analysis. She dodged, not in the prescribed manner, but by rolling under a low crystal formation. Her voice, calm and academic, broadcasted to the entire arena. Notice the Vraxian emphasis on optimal attack vectors, she said, ducking another perfectly executed strike. An admirable approach, assuming your opponent follows the same tactical framework. Her suit's sensors highlighted Vexthal's movements, overlaying them with historical combat data. However, humanity's greatest military innovation isn't our technology or our training. It's this. She broke pattern completely, using one of the crystal formations as a springboard to launch herself at an angle Vraxian combat doctrine, considered tactically irrelevant. Her momentum carried her past Vexthal's guard, inside his optimal range. We understand that perfect form means nothing if your opponent refuses to fight the way you expect them to. The Vraxian warrior adjusted, but his movements were constrained by his own training. Every counter was telegraphed by centuries of doctrine. Maddie's helmet cam highlighted each movement, annotating it with tactical analyses that appeared on the arena's massive displays. Observe how adherence to doctrine creates predictable response patterns, she continued, her academic tone at odds with the intensity of the combat. Human military contractors succeed because we study these patterns, then deliberately subvert them. The crowd watched, mesmerized, as she turned the fight into a living lecture. Each move was accompanied by relevant data, historical parallels, and tactical breakdowns. When Vexthal committed to a textbook finishing move, Maddie didn't just counter it. She explained why it was predictable, demonstrating alternatives even as she evaded. The galaxy sees human adaptability as a weakness, she said, using Vexthal's own momentum to redirect him into one of his crystalline formations. But in warfare, the ability to innovate, she rolled, came up inside his guard. Adapt. A strike to a joint his doctrine claimed was impossible to reach. And overcome. A final move that sent him sprawling. Is the only true constant. The arena fell silent as Vexthal's blade clattered to the ground. Maddie stood over him, not in triumph, but in respect. She extended her hand, a human gesture that her opponent studied for a moment before accepting. This, she addressed the stunned council, helping Vexthal to his feet, is why human military contractors succeed. We don't just win fights. We learn from them. We teach through them. And most importantly, she nodded to her opponent, who was already analyzing the combat data she generated. We understand that every engagement is an opportunity to evolve. Supreme War Scholar Kthax's exoskeleton had shifted to a color no one in the arena had ever seen before. The first trial, he announced, is concluded. The practical demonstration supports the theoretical framework. Maddie smiled beneath her helmet. One down, more to go, and she was just getting started. They're calling it Combat Academia, Torres said, scrolling through his datapad in Maddie's preparation chamber. Your first trial has gone viral across 17 systems. Even the Zenthuri are watching, and they haven't participated in interspecies warfare in 3 centuries. Maddie barely looked up from where she was reviewing combat footage, her hands dancing through holographic displays. Any word on my next challenger? Challengers, plural, Torres corrected. You've got 6 different war scholars demanding trial rights. The Academy hasn't seen this kind of attention since. He paused, double-checking the translation. Well, ever. Perfect. Maddie froze a particular frame, showing Vexthal's attack pattern. Look at this. Every species' combat doctrine leaves fingerprints. The Vraxians favor crystalline geometry in their movements. The Niraxians rely on psychic intimidation. The Kurgans. Dr. Blackwood. The chamber's door arised open, revealing Supreme War Scholar Kthax's imposing form. A moment of your time. Torres straightened, but Maddie waved him down. Of course, Supreme War Scholar. I was just reviewing the data from. You have transformed our sacred trials into a public spectacle. Kthax interrupted, his exoskeleton cycling through colors of agitation. The Academy's communication networks are overwhelmed with requests for access to your next demonstration. Doctoral candidates are submitting papers analyzing your methodology. 3 different species have requested to incorporate your combat recordings into their military training programs. Maddie met his compound eyes steadily. Isn't that exactly what the trials were meant for? The sharing and advancement of military knowledge. Through controlled traditional means. Kthax's mandibles clicked rapidly. Not through. Through. Innovation. Maddie stood, bringing up a historical display. Supreme War Scholar, did you know that Earth's military history is filled with moments where traditional means were upended by new perspectives? She gestured to the hovering images. The longbow at Agincourt. Guerrilla warfare in the American Revolution. The first time someone fought to put tracks on a vehicle instead of wheels. Kthax's color cycle slowed, curiosity overtaking agitation. You believe your approach to the trials follows this pattern. I believe, Maddie said carefully, that the galaxy is changing faster than our military doctrine can keep up. The old ways of teaching, of learning, of proving military theory, they're not enough anymore. That's why human military contractors are in such high demand. We don't just adapt to change. We thrive on it. The Chamber's communication panel chimed. Dr. Blackwood. An aide's voice announced, War Scholar Xterra requests immediate trial. She's claiming priority based on her specialization in adaptive combat theory. Maddie's eyes lit up. Accept. And make sure the Academy's networks are ready this time. We're going to need the bandwidth. Kthax's exoskeleton settled into a deep blue of contemplation. You planned this. All of it. The viral spread of your first trial. The academic response. The revolution in military education. Maddie grinned. Supreme War Scholar. My thesis isn't just about why human military contractors are effective. It's about how we're changing the very nature of warfare and military theory. Each trial isn't just a fight. It's a lesson. And the galaxy is ready to learn. After Kthax departed, Torres shook his head in amazement. You're really going to take on 6 more war scholars. Maddie was already queuing up data on Niraxian combat patterns. No, she said, her eyes gleaming with the light of holograms and purpose. I'm going to teach 6 more lessons about why humanity's approach to warfare is revolutionizing the galaxy. The trials are just my classroom. Her next opponent would be expecting another display of physical adaptation. They'd get that, but they'd also get something no one in the Academy's history had attempted: a real-time demonstration of how human military theory evolved through practical application. Pull up everything we have on Naraxian's psychic warfare patterns, she told Tories, and get me a direct feed to the Academy's educational broadcasts. If they want a show. She activated her combat suit's enhanced recording systems, checking the neural interfaces that would transmit every movement, every decision, every adaptation to the watching galaxy. Let's give them something worth studying. The Thanaxian's neural disruptor wasn't supposed to be there. Maddie recognized it the instant before it activated. A banned weapon that bypassed all standard combat protections. She had half a second to appreciate the irony. After 5 successful trials, she was about to be taken down by the oldest human military lesson of all. Someone always cheats. The pain hit like a supernova, every nerve ending screaming in synchronized agony. Her combat suit's medical systems went haywire, warnings flashing across her helmet display as she collapsed onto the arena floor. Through the haze of pain, she heard the crowd's roar of outrage, saw Supreme War Scholar Cathax rising from his seat, his exoskeleton blazing crimson with fury. War Scholar Dex then, the Thanaxian, stood over her with an expression that translated across species as smug superiority. Perhaps now, his translator broadcast, we can end this farce of human superiority in combat doctrine. Maddie's vision swam, memories of past battlefields merging with the present. A firefight on Proxima B, where her unit had been ambushed by pirates using banned weaponry. A standoff in the Orion cluster where mercenaries had broken every rule of engagement. Each time, humanity had survived not by being stronger or better armed, but by turning disaster into opportunity. Her suit's medical system was already adapting, analyzing the neural disruption pattern, and adjusting her synthetic adrenaline flow. As emergency teams rushed toward the arena, Maddie raised her hand to wave them off. No, she managed through gritted teeth, using her suit's systems to push herself to her knees. The trial continues. Impossible. Dex then stepped back. The disruptor should have. Should have what? Maddie's voice grew stronger as her suit compensated, broadcast now to the entire arena and the millions watching across space. Should have followed your expectations. Should have behaved according to your doctrine. She stood, swaying but upright. Computer, activate full spectrum analysis. Teaching mode. The arena's holographic systems sprang to life, displaying real-time medical data alongside combat analytics. Let's talk about adaptation under extreme conditions, she continued, her academic tone surreal against her obvious pain. Notice how the neural disruptor follows a standard Thanaxian attack pattern. Predictable, just like your combat forms. She took a step forward, then another. Dex then retreated, his weapon forgotten as Maddie's medical readouts told a story that should have been impossible. Human military contractors don't just train for ideal conditions. We prepare for betrayal, for broken rules, for moments when doctrine fails and innovation is all that's left. The arena was dead silent now, every being present witnessing something unprecedented. A lecture continuing through what should have been a lethal attack. Your neural disruptor. Maddie's suit highlighted the weapon with tactical overlays, is based on Thanaxian neural patterns. But human nervous systems. She tapped her helmet, bringing up comparative anatomical displays. We're different. Adaptable. Just like our combat doctrine. She was fully upright now, each movement a lesson in human resilience. This is why we succeed where others fail. Not because we're stronger, or faster, or better armed, but because we turn every setback, every betrayal, every broken rule into a lesson. The medical teams watched in amazement as her suit's systems continued adapting, turning the neural attack data into a real-time study in human medical countermeasures. Today's lesson. She faced Dexthen directly. Is about honor in warfare, about why breaking faith with your opponent doesn't just destroy your tactical advantage. It becomes a teaching opportunity. Supreme War Scholar Cathax's voice cut through the silence. War Scholar Dexthen, you have violated the sacred traditions of the trial. Your status is heresy. No, Maddie interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human military philosophy. Let him stay, let him learn. Because that's what humans do with those who try to destroy us. She smiled, though no one could see it through her helmet. We turn them into case studies in why adaptation beats aggression every time. The arena erupted in a chaos of voices, but Maddie was already moving into a teaching stance, her suit's systems now fully adapted to the neural disruption. Now shall we continue the lesson? I believe we were discussing the evolution of combat ethics in modern warfare. The Arch Scholar's private study existed in a spectrum of light that human eyes weren't meant to process. Ancient weapons and battle records from 1,000 worlds lined walls that seemed to shift between dimensions. Maddie's combat suit automatically adjusted its visual filters, translating the alien architecture into something her brain could comprehend. You understand. The Arch Scholar's voice resonated at multiple frequencies simultaneously, that in 10,000 years, no one has ever approached the trials as you have. The beam's form was barely visible, a shimmer of consciousness more than a physical presence. With respect, Ancient One, Maddie replied, pulling up a holographic display from her suit's database. That's exactly the problem I'm trying to address. She gestured to the floating images, scenes from her past contracts across the galaxy. Look at this footage from the Centauri insurgency. The display showed a group of former pirates working alongside Maddie's team to secure a civilian transport corridor. Traditional doctrine said these pirates were irredeemable. Standard protocol was to eliminate them. Instead, we hired them as security consultants. You turned enemies into allies, the Arch Scholar observed, its form shifting through colors humans had no names for. A dangerous gambit. A human gambit. Maddie corrected, switching to another recording. This is from the Perseus cluster. Former insurgents training peacekeeping forces in anti-smuggling techniques. And here, another scene materialized. Ex-mercenaries helping establish defensive networks for the colonies they once raided. The Arch Scholar's consciousness pulsed with interest. You are not merely demonstrating combat techniques in your trials. You are challenging the fundamental nature of military education. Exactly. Maddie's eyes lit up with passion. The galaxy sees warfare as a constant, an unchanging force that must be met with rigid doctrine and traditional responses. But humanity, we see it as a conversation. She brought up footage from her previous trials, now annotated with deeper analysis. Every fight is a dialogue. Every conflict is a chance to learn, to adapt, to evolve. When that Thanaxian tried to kill me with a neural disruptor, he wasn't just breaking the rules. He was demonstrating why the rules need to change. The ancient being moved closer, its consciousness interacting with the holographic displays in ways Maddie's sensors couldn't quite track. You believe the Academy's approach to military education is obsolete. I believe it's incomplete. Maddie pulled up one final recording, her first contract as a military consultant. Look at this. Fresh out of Earth's military, I was hired to protect a Phraxian mining operation from raiders. Traditional doctrine said to fortify, defend, wait for attacks. Instead, I went to the raiders' camp, learned their language, discovered they were attacking because the mine was contaminating their water supply. And rather than continue the conflict, we hired them to help redesign the mining operation to protect their resources. They became the mine's permanent security force. 0 casualties, 0 losses, and both sides profited. Maddie gestured to the larger collection of evidence floating around them. This is what human military contractors bring to the galaxy. Not just new ways to fight, new ways to think about fighting. The Arch Scholar's form stabilized into something almost comprehensible, and your trials, they are demonstrations of this philosophy. They're more than demonstrations. Maddie smiled. They're proof that the galaxy's approach to military education needs to evolve. Every trial is a lesson. Every opponent becomes a student. Even that neural disruptor attack. It's already being studied by medical teams across 3 sectors, improving combat protection protocols. You are not just defending a thesis, the ancient being realized. You are initiating a reformation of galactic military doctrine. No, ancient one. Maddie's eyes gleamed with the reflected light of 1,000 battles turned into teaching moments. I'm proving that humanity's greatest military innovation isn't our weapons or our tactics. It's our ability to turn every engagement, even these trials, into an opportunity for growth. The real question is the galaxy ready to learn this lesson? The Arch Scholar's response was lost in a sudden flood of emergency alerts. Multiple ships had just appeared in restricted space above the Academy. The final trial was about to begin, and it wasn't going to wait for scheduled hours. The Academy's grand arena had never been this crowded. Species that had been at war for centuries stood shoulder to tentacle, watching as unauthorized vessels breached the planet's defense perimeter. Among them was a familiar silhouette that made Maddie smile beneath her helmet. "Right on time," she muttered, checking her suit's systems. Supreme War Scholar Cathax's voice boomed across the arena. "The Academy is under attack. All trials are suspended until—" "No," Maddie's voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't an attack. This is my final demonstration." She activated her suit's broadcast systems, linking to the Academy's networks. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, welcome to the practical portion of my dissertation defense." The lead ship's comm channel crackled to life, and a familiar crystalline voice filled the arena. "War Scholar Vexthal, reporting as requested, Dr. Blackwood." Another channel opened. "Naraxian Battlemaster Zix, ready for demonstration." One by one, her previous opponents announced themselves, their ships taking formation above the Academy. Even Dexthen, the Thanaxian who had tried to kill her, was among them. "What is the meaning of this?" Cathax demanded, his exoskeleton cycling through colors of confusion and alarm. Maddie stepped to the center of the arena, her suit projecting a massive holographic display of the space above. "My thesis isn't just about human adaptability in combat. It's about how we transform enemies into allies, conflicts into collaborations, and battles into lessons." She gestured, and her former opponents began landing their ships in a precise pattern around the arena. Each of these warriors faced me in trial. Each one learned something about human combat doctrine. And now, she smiled as they entered the arena, taking positions around her. "They're going to help me demonstrate why humanity's approach to warfare is revolutionizing the galaxy. This is unprecedented." The Arch Scholar's voice resonated through the chamber. "The trials have never been combined, evolved, adapted." Maddie's voice carried a note of challenge. "Isn't that exactly what my thesis argues we must do?" She nodded to Vexthal, who stepped forward. "After my defeat, I studied human combat adaptability, integrated it with Vraxian crystal form combat." He demonstrated a move that somehow merged human fluidity with Vraxian geometric precision. "Our military efficiency has increased 43%. Zix, the Naraxian, joined in. Human psychological resilience techniques, combined with our psychic warfare." Purple energy crackled around them in patterns that mimicked Earth martial arts. "We've developed entirely new forms of combat instruction." One by one, each former opponent demonstrated how their encounter with human combat doctrine had transformed their approach to warfare. The arena's holographic systems captured every detail, broadcasting to millions across the galaxy. "This," Maddie declared, moving to join her former opponents in a complex demonstration of hybrid combat forms, "is humanity's true gift to galactic warfare. We don't just adapt, we help others adapt. We don't just learn, we teach. Every conflict becomes a classroom, every enemy a potential ally, every defeat a lesson in victory." The demonstration reached its climax as all 8 warriors moved in perfect synchronization, their diverse combat styles merging into something entirely new. Human adaptability flowed into Vraxian precision, Naraxian psychic techniques, enhanced Thanaxian power moves, creating a combat form that had never existed before this moment. My dissertation isn't just a defense of human military contracting. Maddie's voice carried over the mesmerized crowd. It's proof that the future of warfare isn't about who has the best doctrine, the strongest weapons, or the most rigid traditions. It's about who can adapt, who can learn, and most importantly, who can teach. The arena erupted in a chaos of approval, applause, chemical signatures, psychic emanations, and crystalline resonances all merging into one unified response. Supreme War Scholar Thax rose, his exoskeleton glowing with a color that hadn't been seen in the Academy for 1,000 years. Dr. Blackwood, his voice carried the weight of tradition and the promise of revolution. Your demonstration is accepted. Maddie nodded, standing amid her former opponents, now her demonstration team, her proof of concept, her living thesis. No, Supreme War Scholar. It's not just accepted, it's just beginning. 6 months after Dr. Madison Blackwood's historic dissertation defense, the Academy's halls looked very different. Where once rigid formations of single-species training groups had practiced isolated combat forms, now a kaleidoscope of beings moved in hybrid patterns that would have been impossible before. Maddie stood at her new lecturer's podium, watching a Vraxian crystal warrior flow through modified Wing Chun movements, while their human partner incorporated crystalline geometries into traditional boxing stances. Her combat suit, now bearing the marks of an Academy War Scholar, recorded everything for the next generation of students. Professor Blackwood, a familiar voice resonated through the chamber. The arch scholar's form shimmered into visibility beside her. The council requires your assessment of the new curriculum. Maddie smiled, pulling up holographic data from the past 6 months. Look at these numbers. Combat efficiency across all participating forces has increased by an average of 62%. Conflict resolution rates are up 87%. And most importantly, she highlighted a particular statistic. Successful integration of former adversaries into joint security operations has jumped 200%. The Blackwood Doctrine, the ancient being mused, has transformed more than just our teaching methods. That's because it was never just about combat. Maddie replied, watching as a Naraxian demonstration team helped a group of Thanaxian cadets incorporate psychic awareness into their power-focused techniques. It was about breaking down the barriers between different approaches to warfare. Her wrist computer chimed with an incoming priority message. Another border dispute, another request for human military contractors to help transform conflict into cooperation. But now, instead of going alone, she'd be bringing a mixed team of Academy graduates, living proof that the galaxy's diverse combat traditions could become something greater than the sum of their parts. Your next deployment? The arch scholar inquired. The Carina Nebula situation. Maddie brought up the tactical overview. 3 species fighting over mining rights in an asteroid belt. Traditional doctrine says it's unsolvable without major casualties. Her eyes gleamed. Want to bet on how long it takes us to turn them into business partners? The ancient being's form rippled with what might have been amusement. You have wagered far more on far less, Professor. Maddie's attention was drawn to a particular training pair, a young human cadet working with Dexthan, the very Thanaxian who had tried to kill her during the trials. They were developing a completely new combat form that accounted for neural disruption techniques while incorporating human adaptability principles. From enemies to teachers, she murmured, recording their innovation for the Academy's ever-growing database. That's the real victory. On her office wall, next to her framed dissertation, hung items that told the story of a revolution in military education. Pieces of Vraxian crystal armor given in friendship, a Naraxian psychic focus crystal modified with human biofeedback technology, and at the center, a simple plaque that had become the unofficial motto of the Academy's new approach. Victory isn't about who's standing at the end. It's about how many rise up together. The words were inscribed in 27 different languages, each translation adding its own subtle wisdom to the core concept. Below them, a holographic display showed real-time updates from Academy graduates across the galaxy, each one transforming potential battlefields into laboratories of innovation and cooperation. The Council has received requests from 17 more species seeking to join the program, the Arch Scholar announced. Your trials have become required viewing at military academies across known space. Maddie nodded, already planning her next series of lectures. Then we better give them something worth studying. Computer, begin recording. She moved to the center of the training floor, her suit adapting to demonstrate multiple combat forms simultaneously. Welcome to Advanced Adaptive Combat Theory, she announced to the packed chamber and the millions watching via quantum broadcast. Today's lesson isn't about winning or losing. It's about something humanity learned long ago, something we're finally teaching the galaxy. Every battle is a chance to learn. Every enemy is a future ally. And every end. She smiled at her assembled students. A living tapestry of species working together is just the beginning of something greater. The galaxy was changing, and this time, it was changing together.